It's your Thursday daily delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Happy to have you guys back for another one. Excited about today's show. I'm excited always for these podcasts. It's not just a job. It's fun for me and fun to bring you shows day after day because it's, just a little variety, a little something different every day. And today is no exception. Got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Casey Hankinson, former Gophers hockey player. I covered him like not half a century, come on, a quarter of a century. That's better. Still feeling old, but not quite half century old. Quarter century ago when he played for the Gophers and I was at the Minnesota Daily, University of Minnesota. Casey will join me to talk about this year's Gophers team, still very much connected to that program. He's done some analyst work, I believe, on Bally Sports North this year. And caught up with him just to talk about this year's team. They play Canisius in the first round of the NCAA tournament on Thursday, today, later on tonight, I guess, actually is what it is. And so just really, good conversation with Casey just about the state of the program and the connection he's felt to that team this year. So I hope you enjoy that conversation. Got a Vikings survey that I saw recently. I don't know exactly what to make of it. I don't think the methodology is very sound, but it does indicate that a lot of you are very negative about the Vikings when it comes to this year's free agency and on social media. So I'll get to that in a little bit. Got a listener question that I want to get to and a new song to play before listeners' questions, a little backstory behind that as well. So hope you enjoy that. And at the end of the show, we will get to big signing for Minnesota United. Sang-Bin Jung coming here, midfielder, expected to help with the attack, so that will be a big deal for them to get him in here now. We'll talk about that at the end of the show. First, though, what did I miss? Got to talk Timberwolves. I know some of you on the feedback that I've gotten say, too much Wolves, but this time it is warranted. Karl-Anthony Towns playing for the first time in more than 50 games, and the first time in almost 4 months since injuring his calf. Comes back 9 games left in the regular season. Comes back for a home game against the Hawks, and you really couldn't have scripted it much better if you're Karl-Anthony Towns with the way this game played out. Makes the winning free throws with 3 seconds left in regulation. Wolves win 125-124. A lot of twists and turns in that game. Turns out referees saying the Wolves should have been called for a foul on the Hawks' last possession. I'm sure we'll see the 2-minute report saying they messed that up. The Wolves finally on the right end of a 2-minute report. Will wonders never cease? They finally get one to go their way. 37-37 now. We'll talk about the playoff implications in a minute. But first, now I want to talk about, the Towns situation over the last few months. It's gotten us pretty cynical, right? It's gotten me fairly cynical about the secrecy or the lack of information coming out about his injury, about his calf strain. When's he coming back? What's the team hiding? Why is this taking so long? What is the real story here? And, I think there was some missteps by the team along the way. I think they could have handled this better. I think they could have been more forthright. But also, what I probably found out along the way is that at a certain point, a lot of you don't care so much about that, and especially you did not care about it Wednesday night when he came back and played. Loud ovation for Karl-Anthony Towns in this game when he, announced in the starting lineup and has a productive game, scores the game-winning points. So it's a good reminder for me that I get cynical. I look for these kind of, ulterior motives. I like to find the conspiracy theories in these things. I don't know exactly what happened along the way, but it's a good reminder for me that for some people, that just doesn't matter. And at this point, it doesn't matter to a lot of you what happened along the way. What matters is that Karl-Anthony Towns is back now and contributed big time to a win they needed to have. Here is Towns talking about the game and just kind of coming back the way he did and being able to contribute in those final moments.
Like I said, this is what movies is made of. You come back 51 games, missing sellout crowd, Target Center. And, you get the ball with 7 seconds left, no timeouts, you got to make it. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. It doesn't get better than that. So to be able to come up big for my teammates was, all I've ever wanted to do. Sitting on the sideline, I just wanted to be out there to help them and contribute to winning, and I'm glad I was able to do that tonight.
And again, after the game, you could sense what this meant to him. You could sense what being out meant to him. He was asked after the game. He was just in the post-game media availability. He was kind of asked what the emotions were of the day, what it meant to have that ovation from the fans. Here is Towns on that as well.
Shout out to the fans. Just the love they they gave to me coming back. I mean, it truly helps, and it really is appreciated. Sitting in that house for so many days and not being able to play basketball, only be able to watch the TV. It's crazy. I understand how people feel at home when you're screaming at the TV, telling the players what to do, and then they not doing what you're telling them to do. It gets frustrating. So. I'm just so happy that I'm in this spot where I'm able to contribute, and today was one of those days where I felt the whole day I didn't feel really nervous. You're coming back, you feel nervous. I just felt like I belonged in this jersey. I belonged in this jersey. I've earned the right in the moment to be in this jersey. So coming here, it just felt like a game day. Before I got hurt, and obviously emotions are running high. I'm just so happy, to be on the court. I'm excited to go back on the court. But for me, experience just kicked in. Just keeping my emotions in check, just truly appreciating moment, but not letting the moment overcome me. So,
bottom line, I think you saw a guy who just missed basketball a lot on Wednesday night, and I don't know how the regular season is going to play out the rest of the way. I do know they had to have that game. They're 37-37 now. If they would have lost that game, they would have been in real trouble in the Western Conference standings. As it is, I think they're in 7th right now. Those teams are so bunched together. The Wolves have a bunch of tiebreakers in their favor. It's really going to come down to how they play in these last 8 games. They've got some tough ones. They've got some winnable ones. They've got some teams that are right around them in the standings. I think that last game against the Pelicans here at Target Center is going to be huge. The game against the Lakers is going to be important because the Lakers are right there, although the Wolves have already secured that tiebreaker. There's just going to be so many games along the way in these last 8. They're going to determine their fate, but they had to have this one to get those clutch plays at the end, to get Towns with that bucket at the end or those free throws at the end. That to me tells me that they were a team that at least could make those plays in the end of this game. And for Towns to do it, I don't know. I didn't know how he would look in this first game back. He looked awfully good. Almost looked like he didn't miss a beat, and that for the Wolves is great news. We'll see how it goes the rest of the way.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake. With 24/7 gaming, the good times never have to end. And you can satisfy your cravings at our restaurants and bars. Or relax in one of our luxurious hotel rooms. Those that play together, stay together. And don't forget to join Club M so you can spark new memories and bask in the rewards along the way. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
All right, let's bring in Casey Hankinson now. Like I said at the jump, former Gophers hockey player, captain, great guy I've kept in touch with over the years. I talked to him on Wednesday. The very first part of our conversation for some reason got cut off, so I'm just going to kind of set the scene for the first 30 seconds that didn't get played here. But I basically asked him at the beginning, what this season of Gophers hockey, Gophers #1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament, rocking Mariucci Arena, 10,000 fans at a lot of these games, what that's meant to him as an alum watching these games and kind of having this program be revived the way it has been.
That's what I grew up on, is that big sign of Mariucci, Pride on Ice, and
right.
A simple slogan. It means a lot, and I think Bob has done an incredible job of creating a team culture there. I feel it as alumni for sure. I feel actually part of the team, which is good news or bad news. And so you get invested, and I think all these players are vested in the process, in the team, and they are so fun to watch, not just because they're skilled, but for their determination, their work ethic. So there's a lot of pride watching this hockey team.
Obviously you're going to have pride in your school no matter what. You were a captain, back in the 90s. You had a long family legacy there, but when it goes through kind of the ebbs and flows of the ups and downs of a program, and hit some low points in the last 20 years that weren't forever, but when you see attendance wane, you see the team not having as much success. How much do you lose some of that connectivity, whether it's strictly wins and losses or whether it's just an overall feeling of connectedness to the program?
Well, we talked off line a little bit about there's so much to do, especially as you get older with kids and parents and teams, and so it's easy for Gopher hockey to just get lost in the shuffle a little bit.
Right.
But my assessment of it is there's always a lot of skill that is there, but there seems to be an abundance of character this year. And, when teams get along, they play well. And I don't know what comes first. They play well and they get along, or they get along and they play well. But even Nye's coming back. Most people probably, I would have thought that he left he had a great year last year and he's gone. But what a smart thing for him to do. Come back in this year as a sophomore, have a great season. And you need special players like that have leadership, that have character, that can just drive the bus. And I think Bob realizes that as he's gone on with his tenure in coaching, his character matters. And this team has a lot of it. And so it's easy to get connected to people that are doing well and high integrity. And I feel like it's easy to stay connected to this team because they're just so intriguing and they have so much character.
Now, a lot of people have weighed in on this, and it's, some of it's recency bias, some of it's apples, oranges, whatever other fruit you want to throw into the mix. But that top line right now, the Nyes line with the young guys, where does that to you, a Gopher hockey historian to a certain degree, where does that to you, where do you put that line in all the lines you've seen throughout Gopher hockey history?
Well, my immediate reaction is, who cares? Let's just watch them and have fun.
That's fine. I like it.
I wasn't around with Broughton, but I got to imagine that line was pretty dang good. I wasn't around when John Mayasich was around, so that line had to be pretty dang good. I don't feel like there's any need to say this is the best. I feel like people say that, then two people, then three people, then four people, and all of a sudden you've got a story.
Yeah.
They're just a really fun line to watch. Have there been lines better than them? I don't know. I haven't seen them all.
Sure.
But they are special. I hope they stay that way because, hey, hockey is a weird thing. It can change on a dime. You never know. And it doesn't feel like it's going to, but I certainly hope that they continue to have the chemistry that they have. And they've been a lot. Having said all what I said, they've been a lot of fun to watch this year.
Yeah, no doubt. And, Casey, as you think about, you went through a lot of playoff battles back in the day. Like I said, you were a captain multiple times, just kind of throughout your playing career. You were captain a lot of different places. You were, leadership obviously matters, but this time of year with postseason, when it's a one and done situation, now that they're in NCAA tournament playing Canisius on Thursday, and hopefully many more games after that for that program. What is kind of the element of playoff hockey or just clutch performance in general that you think, as a player, as a former player, you think matters the most? What are some of those elements that allow people to elevate their game this time of year?
You have to crave it. You literally have to crave the pressure and crave those situations. A quote I love is, everything that you want is on the other side of fear. Huh. And there are players and teams that will be fearful of making a mistake. And I don't want to do this because that could mean that. And
right.
Your best players will not feel that way. Your best players will not succumb to pressure. They will just want to go out and perform. And it may work, it may not. But if you can lose that restrictiveness of the fear of the outcome and realize that minute 1 is just as important as minute 60 in a game, I think those are big things. Because, the last minute goalie's pulled, you're trying to do all this stuff, you're working extra hard. Well, you got to be doing that in minute 1 of the game as well, because they all count the same. But I think the biggest thing is not being afraid of failure, not being afraid to do the thing that is going to screw up, but more importantly, go after it and get it done and play less restrictive.
How are you able to do that in your career? And did you have particular teammates that you thought kind of embodied that and were able to be in that moment and excel in those moments?
Well, you do it as a group. And, if I look back at my stats, which I don't ever do, but I had more points in playoff games than I did regular season, because you just want it. I mean, that's where the competitiveness and the desire to win, you just do not want to lose. And you can't control all circumstances, of course. But if you can have a nucleus of guys like that, I think, the teams that we had, there was, 4, 5, 6 guys that maybe start with it, and then it carries on to the rest of the team. And it does get contagious, just like a bad attitude gets contagious in a hockey locker room. If you look at somebody's eyes, you can tell if they're determined or scared. You really can. And the more guys that have those eyes of determination, the better your teams are going to be.
Bob Motzko, you referenced him at the beginning, and just what a job he's done there. And obviously he came after Don Lucia, who won 2 national titles in 2002, 2003. Those are the most recent for the program. What in particular to you stands out about Bob as a coach, how he's able to have success and as a leader?
So many ways to answer that. I think first is the humility. I think Bob does an incredible job of making you feel part of him and part of the program. I can't tell you what an honor it is to actually feel a part of the program. And my youngest I'll tell you a funny little story. My youngest has just turned 12, and we were leaving a Gopher game. we were leaving a Gopher game, and I did a telecast, which I hadn't done in a long time, against Michigan, and we were turning left off of University Boulevard onto 35. And my son turned and said, "Dad, I feel like Mariucci is my second home."
Wow.
And yeah, I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I just feel like I can go all over the rink and just go and find places." And I think that is because Bob has left a culture of you are allowed to be part of the program. And a few times after games, I brought my son down there, and it's no problem at all. And the only way that you can feel that is if you're welcome. And I think Bob does an incredible job of welcoming all those around him. I'm not even just talking about hockey players or Gophers or whatever, but he's a very welcoming guy. And I think that bleeds into the program. The players that are down there, shake your hand, come up, say hi. They're not looking in a different direction. And I just think above all the things he's done, and he's a guy that's determined, he's got grit, he's got so much going on, but I think he's just an incredible job at welcoming the program back to the alumni and to the current players, and frankly, the whole state of Minnesota or whoever else follows Gopher hockey.
Now, back when you were playing, we kind of took that for granted, right? I mean, the building was like that when, you were playing under Doug Woog, and we've told some great Doug Woog stories over the years, of course. And just something happened along the way, and the low point probably that Big Ten series a few years ago, the playoff series where there's less than 2,000 people there, and some of that's circumstance, some of that's time of day, time of year, other stuff. The Big Ten, things like that. But to have it back to this point where it had been down and now is up again, what do you feel in that building right now? And does it feel like it did when you were playing?
It feels like a place that you want to be and you need to be there. And if you're not there, you're missing out. That's the best way that I think of it, is if I can't get to a game, I'm now bummed I can't be there because of that energy that is in the building. And, remember, you go back to the 90s. Well, there was no Wild there from 2002 or 1993.
No pro hockey, yeah. Right.
Yeah, so Gopher hockey filled that void for a lot of years. And then, of course, they won the national championships in 2003, and including Blake Wheeler's famous goal at Xcel Energy Center, and the place going crazy. So there was time when the Wild and Gophers did coexist in an incredible environment. But the Big Ten and WCHA, that did make a big impact because you lost that in-state rivalry and the connection that everyone was looking forward to. And I think again, Bob always said it: if we have a winner, people will come back. And he always said, Gopher hockey fans are there. We just got to make sure they're coming out. And they've reset the bar again. I mean, it's probably even more impressive in this environment with everything that's going on. And especially if you want to even talk about youth kids, youth hockey players didn't play 11 months a year. They had time to go for hockey games on Friday and Saturday. Now families just don't have as much. But the electricity in the building, student section, sold out crowds. Probably the best thing they did also with the Big Ten ticket prices is drop those, because I think you saw what happened when you say 200,000 people. There's probably like 800 people in that building,
right,
against Michigan. But I just think that electricity that is contagious again, that you want to be a part of.
Now they've got, like I said, Canisius in the first round. A lot of experience on Canisius. They got like some guys that are 25 years old, and that'll happen in college hockey. But as you think about the tournament as a whole, they're the number one overall seed. You have to declare them the favorite, or at least one of the two or three heavily favored teams to win it all. What in your mind will be the difference maker when it is a one and done, when it is could probably be some 1 or 2 goal games along the way? What is the difference here, and how do they come out on top?
Well, I think it does start a bit in goaltending as well, and close. I don't know that I've seen a more sound, and granted, I'm not a goaltending expert, but I've seen a lot of goalies play, a more technically sound goalie, of just his angles and how far he gets out of the net and tracking the puck. So I do look at the goalie first of, what kind of impact are they going to have? And I think there's a lot of faith and trust in Justin and goal. It can be a game of bounces. We talked about minute 1 being the same as minute 59. So you can't let teams think they're in the game and stay in the game. And that's what their first game with Canisius, they're going to have to get that out, that Canisius can't stay with us. They probably are a favorite, but in a one game series or event, it's awfully hard to make sure you're the best team, because you just don't know how the breaks are going to go. But having said that, I think last year's experience and losing at the Frozen Four, having the majority of their team back, you've got a lot of guys that have been there before. So I do think that's going to matter. I do think what we talked also about earlier, those guys aren't going to have the fear. I just know they won't for Gopher hockey. They are here to do something, and that's to win a national championship. And I think that drive, is going to be there for more than 5 guys, but that actually can have an impact on the game. Because it's one thing to have the drive, but maybe not have the skill set. And I think there's so many Gophers that have both. So I feel like they're going to have a deep run.
A couple more things for you, Casey. Really enjoying this catch up. How hard is it when, just thinking out loud here? I mean, hockey, when it is that single elimination, we talk about, there's upsets in the NCAA basketball tournament that are happening right now, but that's like a race to 60, 70, 80 points. And over the course of time, you have a chance to come back at a point. If it's a race to 3, that really does bring an element into it that you just don't see in basketball, for example.
Yeah, and what makes it exciting, and that's why, again, that first minute is so important, or that first period, because you can't win the game in maybe the first 10 minutes, but you could certainly lose it by not having the right energy or team chemistry or whatever you want to call it, or preparation or readiness for the game. But it's that even flow of not getting absolutely so charged up and then not getting so down on yourself when they do score a goal. And again, teams that have been there before understand that. And I remember being in games when we'd be down, and some teams would have this and some teams wouldn't, where we would be down 2-0, and you'd think on the bench, these guys don't even stand a chance. I know we're going to come back. And sure enough, you would, because you would not get so down. And again, I think the leadership and the character are going to play pivotal roles during the ups and downs of these playoffs for the Gophers. Yeah,
it should be fun to watch. Casey, any final thoughts? I know you're checking out the Wild, you're checking out all these things. You're a fan of all sports, so I'm hoping you're enjoying this time of year.
Yeah, it's a fun time of year. I mean, specifically to the hockey, it's a tough game. It's a physical game. There's more block shots that have never been before. There's so much grit and determination and skill, and it's one of those weird games that you can't really have 1 or 2 players control the whole outcome. They can dictate some of it, but not necessarily control it. So for me, it's always a fun game to watch. I have so much pride in the Gophers and certainly hope that they do the best they can, but they've also just been so entertaining to watch all season long. And then I think the other thing that's going to be interesting, and it's going to be good with Mariucci going to the smaller ice sheet, is, they play on a big ice surface, which I would say is definitely to their advantage. And now they've got to go to a smaller ice sheet. They've proven they can win and they can do that. But I do think that always makes a little bit of difference at the end of the year too. Yeah, absolutely. Well, these games should be fun, starting with Thursday against Canisius. Casey Hankinson, great catching up with you. Enjoy some well-earned time off, and we'll talk to you soon. All right. Thanks, Michael. Great catching up with you too. Always enjoy catching up with Casey Hankinson. Even better that we get to do it for a podcast this time. Hope you guys enjoyed that as well. Just good perspectives on what this year has meant to him, what it's meant to a lot of alums, what it's meant to a lot of fans. Plain and simple, to have this program back to where it was in the past, and maybe even exceeding some of those years in the past as well. Okay, I mentioned at the beginning that a lot of you just don't care about the negativity. It seems like some of you, though, are trending towards the negative. I saw this thing earlier this week, a study apparently from gambling.com. The methodology on this is very strange. I can't really get a handle on how this was all put together. It just basically looks like an Excel spreadsheet that got cut and pasted. So I'm not going to go too deep into how valid I think this was, but basically they put out they did some kind of research on social media and how negative all 32 NFL fan bases are towards since the start of NFL free agency this year, which isn't very long, right? This is like a week that they've been in free agency, 10 days since the start of the legal tampering period, whatever you want to call that. But what did strike me is that the Vikings fans were the most negative, and by far on Twitter they were the most negative, like by a massive amount. I'm looking at it right now. Again, the methodology on this, the methodology is rough, but in terms of negative Twitter posts, I'm just going to isolate on Twitter because then you don't got to add all these things together, stuff like that. It says the Vikings fans, 37.2% of all tweets since free agency began have been negative. No other team, no other fan base was more than 20%,
and no more than 3 were above 15%. The Vikings fans up at 37.2%. Again, I have no idea how this was compiled. I have no idea if it's valid or true. What I do know is that when this got shared on social media pretty widely this week, a lot of people were like, "Yeah, that checks out. Story checks out." The Vikings fans are very, very negative on social media, and I don't know what the reasoning for that is. What's going on here? Maybe it's a lot of worrying about what's going to happen. Maybe some of it's wondering about maybe some of it's Adam Thielen, unhappy about him getting cut. Maybe some of it's wondering what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins. I don't know what it is. I don't know why people are so particularly negative right now. I do know that there's a lot of angst in the fan base, just in general. That happens when you don't win a Super Bowl for forever, more than 60 years now. I've witnessed a lot of that. I get it. I understand why there's a lot of angst, but man, if this really is the most negative Twitter space by far of any fan base, maybe we gotta get this a little bit more toned down. Maybe we gotta get a little more happy, a little bit less aggressive in that space, a little bit more understanding of what's going on. I don't know. And again, I don't know how real this is, but I believe it. And that's the thing. I believe it based on what I've seen on Vikings Twitter. So there you have it. Vikings fans, the most negative on social media, and particularly Twitter, of all the NFL fan bases, at least according to this very unscientific study that I saw and has been widely circulating on the internet, social media this week.
Time to check my social media, yeah, to see who loves me online. Hashtag blessed life.
Speaking of social media, that is the new introduction to any segment where I take questions from Twitter. Kind of a funny backstory. That song is called Virtual Life, and it's been on a lot of TikTok videos in the last few weeks, last few months. My kids love it. They sing it. They sing it around the house like all the time. They'll just bellow it out. Even my 3-year-old will sing it. They just think it's hilarious, and I think it's hilarious too, and I love it. So I started thinking about how funny it would be, how fun it would be to be able to use that at the beginning of, to use it on the show, to use it as a kind of the introduction to any, reader feedback, listener feedback that I get. So I got to do things on the up and up, though. I want to get permission if I'm going to use something, even though it's, all over the internet, stuff like that. So basically, it's a song from several years ago. I tracked down one of the original artists, Dustin Akui. I find him on Instagram, and I'm like, okay, this is a long shot, but I send him a DM on Instagram. I'm like, hey, I love this song. I'd love to use the first handful of seconds on my podcast. Let me know if that's okay. I don't hear from him for like a week, and I'm like, he probably just didn't get it, or maybe he's just ignoring it. But then a couple nights ago, he responds and says, yes, absolutely, that's great. I would love it. You have my permission. So we kind of, been trading messages back. I'm going to send him a link to the podcast so he can hear it. But I love that. I love that song. It's just hilarious to me. It's a parody song, but it's amazing. And so you'll be hearing that occasionally when I do a listener section, a listener feedback section. So hope you do enjoy that. Now, the question itself, let's get to that. Matt Wells wants to know, with Marc-Andre Fleury voted by the NHLPA as best guy to have in a locker room, who is the best guy or gal in the other locker rooms in town, including at Star Tribune Sports? I'm going to take the easy way out. I'm just going to answer this question in terms of the Star Tribune. Who are the best people at the Star Tribune? And honestly, I love all of my colleagues, but here's a Chip Scoggins story, because Chip Scoggins is an all-star. He is one of my favorites there. He's one of the best friends of the podcast. I've had tremendous help from a lot of people within the newsroom. Patrick Royce, Chip, Lavelle, everybody who's jumped on, Chris Hines, Sarah McClellan. I could go on and on and on about all the people who come on. But Chip, I asked him the other day, hey, I'm doing this post on Hendon Hooker, the quarterback for Tennessee. And he and I had been texting a little bit about it the other day. It's like, hey, I'm not really a Tennessee Volunteers expert, but I saw he got, a couple people have him going to the Vikings in a mock draft. Can I use a little bit of the information you'd given me on text in the post I'm doing? And I'm just thinking he's going to say, sure, go ahead. Instead, he writes like 300, 400 words for me that's more detailed, that's more fleshed out, that's more kind of, what he wanted in his own words, what he wanted to express about it, and then even changed one of those sentences, said, hey, I have here's a few thoughts, here's some things, I corrected one of them here, what do you think? So Chip Scoggins, a guy that's always going to go above and beyond. So Matt Wells, He was one of the good guys in the Strip Sports locker room. We got a lot of good ones, but I'm going to give a shout out to Chip in that regard for going above and beyond so often, including on this podcast and including the other day in that post that I was working on. Let's do one more from Russell Richardson. Wants to know if Byron Buxton plays more games at DH than center field, do the Twins still make the playoffs? That's assuming they would make the playoffs even if he was in center field more than at DH. I don't know. I'm a little more optimistic about their outfield this year. I think the trade for Michael A. Taylor was a good move, or acquiring Michael A. Taylor was a good move. I think they've got some depth there as long as Joey Gallo can play some in the outfield, doesn't have to spend all his time at first base, as long as they're healthy enough there. So I think the plan at the beginning with Buxton to be DH, I guess that's okay with me. I think they still do need him, though, at least approaching an even split. If he plays 2/3 of his games at DH and 1/3 of his games in center field, I think that's going to be a bad omen for their whole season. So I'm going to say it's got to be at least close to an even split. I don't know if it's got to be more in center field than DH, but I think if you're going to get full value from Byron Buxton, he's got to be in the outfield more often than not, or at least close to that number. So I want to see it. I want to see him be in the outfield. I want to see him healthy enough to be out there because he impacts games that way just as much as he does with his bat, if not more. Let's finish with the cooler. Like I said at the beginning, Minnesota United. I'm not the foremost Minnesota United expert. I follow them. I cover them, from a journalistic standpoint. Love having Adrian Heath on, but I deferred to my good friend John Marthaler, who writes a lot more about soccer than I do. Said, "Hey John, how big of a deal is the signing of Sang-Bin Jung?" He said, "Quite a big deal, actually," and I agree. He kind of laid out why. They need goals, they need playmakers, they need scoring, especially in the absence of Emmanuel Reynoso right now. So this signing by the Loons, they welcomed him to the team just today officially. That was a big deal. This gives them another opportunity to have a playmaker, some creativity, some finishing. Comes over, has got a pretty good pedigree, obviously from where he's been playing so far. So that is a big deal for the Loons. We'll see, kind of how quickly he can get acclimated. But, I mean, his pedigree alone is worth it. I mean, he's coming here on loan from Wolverhampton to the Premier League. I mean, that's the best league in the world. And so, if they're signing him to this 3-year contract, if they're thinking they're bringing in a young player, 22 years old, Sang-Bin Jung could be a big deal for the Loons. We'll see exactly how they were able to use him. Exactly, it's like I said, how long it takes him to get up to speed here. But this could be a pretty big deal for them. This could be a pretty big acquisition. It's been rumored for a while that they've been after someone of his caliber, and they finally were able to get him. So that is a good get for the Loons, and I think it could be a pretty big deal for them going forward. That will do it for me today. Chris Hine from the Star Tribune, another one of the All-Stars, will join me on Friday's show. At least that's the plan right now. Talk more Cats return, talk more big picture with this team. 8 games left, a lot of big ones along the way, and we will get into that on Friday's show. Until then, I'm Michael Rand. Thanks for listening. Back at it again tomorrow.